Hi, everyone, and welcome to this workshop on school improvement plans. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how school councils can be involved, school councils and parents and caregivers can be involved in developing a school improvement plan for their school. But first, I want to welcome all of you today on this Sunday, and thank you for joining the conference today. I want to introduce myself. My name is Aretha Phillip. I am the PIAC rep for Ward 13. And I'm on the school council at York Mills Collegiate, where I have 2 kids in the French immersion program. I am really passionate about public education, and I've been involved in school councils since I can remember. I'm always interested in ways to improve student achievement, equity, and well-being. And I think now more importantly than ever is, the safety of our students. I work by day, I work at the City of Toronto. I'm the chief of protocol for the city, but I've always loved volunteering, and this is just part of one of my passions. So I just wanted to say welcome to all of you. I also want to let you know that we have 2 interpreters on today. We have Barbara Chow, who's our Cantonese interpreter, and we've got Queenie, who is our Mandarin interpreter. If you have requested those services, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says interpretation. And from there, you should be able to choose the language, whichever interpreter you have requested. And if we stay on that button, you will see there is beside it a button called reactions. And I just wanted to point everyone over to that reaction button because I wanted to do a little bit of a quick kind of pulse survey. To see just people's understanding of the school improvement plan. So if everybody could go to the reaction button, there's one that says yes, and I'm going to ask a series of questions. And as you answer, use the button. I only want you to use the yes button. And then if this what I'm asking you is not familiar, then just click off of the button. So my first question for you is, who has heard of the school improvement plan? Who's heard of it? Okay, few of you. All right. The next question then is, you may have heard of it, but have you actually seen it? Who has seen their school's improvement plan? Okay, so not too bad. If you saw the school improvement plan, was it because the principal shared it? Is that how you saw it? Okay. And then my next question is, who has been involved in the development of the school improvement plan, of their school improvement plan? Okay, that's really helpful because it gives me just a sense of where we are, and we are very far away from where we should be. So today, okay, sorry, I'm just trying to toggle over. Today, what we're going to learn, you're going to learn about is, what is a school improvement plan? What should be included in your school improvement plan? How it's developed, how you can get involved, what are the kind of timelines that you should be looking at? And then I'm going to share a case study of a school improvement plan that I think is really good. So next thing. So I think that we can all agree that our students deserve learning environments that lead to improved outcomes and achievement and well-being. I think that's really important. And as I said before, even more so than before. Every school is unique, every child is unique, and every family is unique. And they all have their own goals, challenges, and opportunities. And it's really important that as a board and as school councils that we're aware of that and we're conscious of that. And we think about that as we go about our school council activities. The TDSB is committed to creating an equitable school system where achievement and well-being of every student is fostered through culturally rich learning experiences in diverse, accepting environments where all are included. Every voice is heard and every experience is honored. And I think that's really important. And we need to hold the board accountable to that in our schools. It's important that we hear a wide range of voices and experiences, because that really helps us in developing meaningful and relevant goals within our schools. The school improvement plan needs to be inclusive of the voices of staff, of students, parents, and caregivers to make sure that multiple points of view are considered and discussed as part of the plan, and that we all work together to achieve these goals. As you can imagine, if we all aren't on the same page, how effective is a school improvement plan going to be? And even more so, it's really important that we report and we evaluate the progress when we develop these schools improvement plans. But how can you, as a parent, you're probably saying, okay, this is all great, Aretha, but how can I make sure that as a family and a school community, I'm involved? How is my input being gathered? And today, that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Because the school improvement plan is the vehicle for making that happen. Okay. So what is the school improvement plan? To support our students, every school participates in the school improvement process plan. This is mandated by the Ministry of Education and sent down as a directive to the schools. Their responsibility to create 3 goals that will bring meaningful and relevant supports to our local school community. So the goals should be focusing on achievement, well-being, and equity, and they're central to the operation of each school, and they impact how each school spends their budgets, supports staff development, and makes positive changes in the school and the classrooms. Staff, parents, caregivers, and students and community members, as I mentioned before, all play a key role in each step of the improvement plan. So I would encourage each and every one of you to please reach out to your principals to learn more about your school improvement plan process and how you can share your voice. And I'm going to give you a bit of information now on how you can do that. So just to reiterate, the school improvement plan, it's a roadmap. The roadmap of the changes that your school needs to make to improve the level of student achievement. It identifies when and how the changes will be made, and it is mandated by the Ministry of Education. So who's involved in developing this really important document? It involves teachers, it involves the school councils, families, and community members. And the purpose of it is to hold schools accountable, and it should be able to measure the improvement in your school. So I know there's a lot of language and words on this, and my apologies for that. It's not how we normally like to do a PowerPoint presentation, but then at least you can take this away with clear direction. I know that it's going to be posted on the TDS website after this. You can get this information. So just a bit of update. In March 2019, the board received a report from staff that outlined a consultation process for the development of the SIP. What are we going to do, especially during this time of COVID? The board accepted that directive, and a consultation group was established through outreach to various TDSB community advisory committees and staff groups. And they met just to get a sense of where was the board at with the school improvement plan. They really wanted to get a sense of how they could involve and engage parents, families, and caregivers in developing a school improvement plan. They gathered the feedback and they developed a set, they came up with some findings. I want to share those with you because I think this is important. They recognized that they needed to do more. They needed to do more to let families of students who are underserved specifically know about the school improvement plan. They also felt it was important that school councils are required to be consulted, but they found that even though that said that in the Ministry of Education's Regulation 6112, the practice varied widely across the board. They recognized that capacity needed to be built because there's many things within a school improvement plan that parents needed to understand a little bit more in order to effectively engage. They also needed to explore a variety of methods and strategies for engaging families and value multiple forms of engagement. So as we know, not every parent can come to a school council meeting in the evening. Some parents can only come at lunch or they can come in the morning. We need to make sure, especially in the virtual environment, while it does allow, I think the beauty of the virtual environment, it allows more platforms for engagement. They needed to make sure that diverse voices and perspectives were considered and that school councils aspired to engage a variety. So the school councils took the responsibility to ensure that a variety of parent voices were heard. And as well, most importantly, provide families with information about the school improvement process. You can't be involved in something if you don't know anything about it. So that is critical. So what did they identify for 2021, 2022 this year? This is board approved. These were the interim expectations of schools around the school improvement plan. Every school needs to explain the school improvement process and the value of family involvement. So you should hear about this through your school via the principal. Principals are to seek input on the initial thinking regarding the school improvement plan goals and the school council. This is now a requirement under Regulation 613, and they need to get that input from all parents and caregivers. And as well, principals need to share the school data. As you know, every 4 years, the school does census data gathering. It's important that they share this with parents and caregivers, because those surveys focus on well-being, equity, and achievement outcomes, and that's the data that is used in the to help shape the school improvement plan. So I put a little link here that you can, for anyone who'd like to see the report, I encourage you to look at that and even bring it to a school council for discussion. Okay. So here, I'm now going to get into some information about what the school improvement plan includes. And if people have questions, you can definitely ask that at the end. I'm going to just look in the chat to see if there's any questions. Okay, so please put your questions in the chat and we'll definitely get through them. So what information does the school improvement plan include? One, it's a description of the specific goals and activities that a school will undertake to achieve. It breaks down the responsibility of the principal, staff, students, parents, family, and community in achieving this goal. So who's going to be responsible for what? What additional resources their school might need in order to achieve these goals? And this is really important when your principal presents the budget every year. You need to make sure that the budget aligns with the school improvement plan. There's no point in having all kinds of goals and activities if there's no money to support that. So you need to work with the principal to ensure that resources are kept aside for this. And then it also needs to include, how are we going to evaluate how effective the school's been achieving them? Because if we don't evaluate, then we have no idea if something's working. And if we have no idea how something's working, we have no way of improving it. So your school improvement plan should answer the following questions. Where are we now? Where does our school sit right now with student achievement, well-being, and equity? Where do we want to be? What do we need to learn? And how do we know what gets measured? How are we going to do that to know we're making a change? What actions are we going to take? And what changes, what outcomes are going to be making to our thinking and behavior? And really important, there should be a layer of equity in your school improvement plan. This is a board directive. It's really important. It means different things in different schools, but fundamentally, we want to make sure that with this school improvement plan, every student is supported through equitable and inclusive learning. We need to make sure that we are identifying and confronting and eliminating barriers to student success. We need to make sure we're aligning resources where needed, ensuring that it is shared leadership and building staff capacity. So if there's gaps, we need to make sure that our teachers understand what we're trying to achieve. And really, it's also important to making sure that staff, students, and the community members and families and caregivers, and I say community members, I mean school councils and families, is make sure that there is a place for parent voices, parent and caregiver voices to be heard. So the SIP process. So I think I mentioned this, the 3 fundamental goals. There's 3 fundamental goals in every SIP process: achievement, equity, and well-being. So what does this mean? So achievement. We want to have students. We want students coming out of our school board system that are deep thinkers, they're problem solvers, creators, collaborators, they're global citizens of the world. And these are the competencies that our students are going to require And these competencies are different than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the learning process has changed as we have grown. We need to make sure that whatever our achievements are, that they are leading to positive results for all. And as we know, literacy and math are important foundations of this work. So what will achievement focus for your school look like moving forward? You need to ask that question. What will it look like? And what does the staff need to learn in order to fulfill this goal? And then if we look at well-being, our students need to be healthy individuals who possess a positive sense of self, spirit, and belonging. And I think we could all agree that this has never been as important as it is right now as we come out of this come out of the pandemic. We know that many children are suffering from mental health and wellness during this particular time, and we really need to make sure that we have relationships with our students. The relationships that they have with each other and with adults are really important. And every student needs to have peers, friends, and adults that are caring so that they can turn to in their school to deal with life's challenges. We need to make sure that we're developing optimism, self-confidence, resiliency, and a sense of belonging to our students. And this is really important to success. We tend to focus a lot on achievement, and you might find that your schools focus a lot on achievement, but they also need to look at well-being, because these two go hand in hand. A happy kid will be a kid who's interested in learning. So you need to remember that. So the questions to ask are, what is an important goal that will increase the well-being of the students in my school? And what do staff need to learn in order to move forward with this goal? The next layer is around equity. The board is committed to equity, and this means that sometimes we have to engage in some really challenging conversations at each and every school. Obviously, they're doing that at the board level, but we also have to do that within our schools. We need to ask critical questions of our school and how we're doing. You know, what barriers exist in our school that might be keeping students from achieving? What biases might persons in the school possess about what certain groups of students are able to achieve? What needs to change in terms of the instruction, the environment in the school, and the relationship that the school has to achievement and well-being for all students? And how might our community and our parents, our school councils, assist us with this? I think it's really important to remember, and I'll say this a lot as we go through this, as I go through the presentation. There's not one size that fits all. Each and every school is unique, every family, every student, is unique, and we need to make sure that we look at this differently. It's going to look different depending on your school community. Okay. I spoke a little bit about the importance of gathering data. So I want you to know that the data that your school collects, and there's a lot of it, is a key driver to supporting achievement and well-being. It's a key driver to understanding what our school's relationships are. It's an important, more than, so I'll go back, sorry. So when we last did the school census data, it was in 2017. More than 220,000 students and parents and caregivers filled out that census. That's a core foundation of data, open data, that principals use, the school uses in order to identify the school improvement plan, because it goes down that granular. They have this data for each and every school. The data provides a comprehensive picture of who our students are, how they're learning. There's other things that are also used in this. They use the EQA results. I know that that's been halted. We're not doing that right now. Literacy tests we're not doing, but that's the data that's used, report card data, and data from the classrooms in the school. It tells us who our students are, what their school experiences are, their relationships at school, their physical health and emotional well-being. These are all part of the census data. Okay. So you're probably thinking, Aretha, this is a lot. How are we going to do this? There's only so many days in the year. How do you do this? So here's the timelines. Step one, in September and October of the school year, is the time that you analyze and plan. I mentioned all that data that the TDSB collects. Schools are supposed to be reviewing and interpreting that data and considering the different perspectives of our students, parents, and caregivers. So that should be happening September to October, analyzing the data. Step 2 is to learn and implement, and this happens across October to June. Based on the goals, staff will develop the learning priorities that will support adjustments in the classroom. Staff will work together and share their learning and best practices with each other and benefit students throughout the school. This is an organic process because while learning and implementation is taking place, we should be monitoring and measuring. So it's important that the work of the school improvement plan happens throughout the year to ensure that the work is being done, to determine what else needs to be done, and ensure that students are thriving. So I would say in terms of monitoring, measuring, this is a fundamental part of your school council's meetings. You should be asking the principal, where are we with the school improvement plan? And this is why it's important that they present it at the beginning of the year, so that together you can work through what's working, what's not working, what might need more, what might need more attention. And then from May to June, this is the time as the school year is rolling up, that schools will gather the data of the work that they've done, and they'll measure it year over year to determine have they been successful. And to me, this is all part of being open and transparent. Okay. So there's 3 ways of which school councils and families can be involved and caregivers can be involved in the SIP process. 1, this is probably the most common one. The principal-led school improvement planning committee, there's a school council facilitated process, and there's a school community and consultation process. So the principal-led school improvement plan, this is the one that's probably the one that is happens most of the time, except the principal probably in your schools are developing the improvement plan, but then not actually engaging with school councils, families, and caregivers. So ideally, the principal should establish a committee that would organize and implement the planning process to the development of the plan. This committee should involve the principal, parent caregiver representatives, school council representatives, staff representatives, and that includes teaching and support staff, student council reps where relevant. So sometimes it's important, I think, especially in the high school level, to get student involvement, and community reps. So if you're a school that has other community representatives, I think it's important to ask them to participate. This committee gathers all the relevant data to identify and prioritize the needs of the school. They will conduct surveys if they need more information. They will consider all of the data and establish a list of priority needs. And then they'll draft a school council based on those needs. And then they'll present a draft of the school improvement plan at a meeting of the school council. They will then get consensus and feedback at that school council meeting. They'll go away and they will consider all the input, make changes where necessary to reflect the input, and then they'll come back and present a revised school improvement plan to the school council and to a meeting of school staff. They'll then submit that to the superintendent of education for consideration. That's one way. Now, as I said, you probably know about this way, but you may or may not have been consulted, and it may not be presented to you in draft form. You probably just get the final. Another way to do it is a school council facilitated process. Now, this is a much more advanced way of doing it, and not every school council is at a stage where they could take this particular body of work on and take the lead. So in this case, the principal would inform the school council about the SIP and how they can be involved in the development. The principal will give the school council all of the information and the resources, so templates, information, staff process, timelines about the school process, about the plan and the process. The school council would take the responsibility of establishing a working group with the council and non-council members to get feedback. They'll consult with families and caregivers on the SIP using different tools such as online surveys, meetings, newsletters, social media, etc. They'll also gather the same feedback from school staff. They will then bring back the report with recommendations for feedback. for feedback, and then it will go through that same iterative process. They'll get the feedback, they'll go away, they'll meet again, they'll come back with a final to be presented to the superintendent. The third one is the school council, school and community consultation process. This is where principal informs families in the school council about the school improvement plan and their opportunity to contribute. The principal will outline all the ways in which families in the council can give feedback. The principal and his or her designate will collect all the information and inform schools and councils. And then that's how that one would come. And then here's the process, the final approval process. As I mentioned before, approves the plan by the superintendent in the central office. The principal should convene a follow-up meeting of the school community to present the final school improvement plan. And then it's about defining all of the roles of those that participated in the implementation, the monitoring, and the review of the plan. So this goes to school councils. When the plan is developed, you might want to start thinking about how can our activities further enhance the school improvement plan. Your principal should be doing the same thing along professional development, and the community too can also echo ways of which they can participate and improve the plan. Improve the plan. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? I know it's a lot of information, but is there any questions before I go into the case study? Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so this is a school improvement plan that I really like. It's a bit of an older one, but I really like the way of which they use data to inform not just the teachers and the principal, but as well how the school councils became involved. So here we go. So this school's overall goal was they wanted to improve student achievement, well-being, and equity, sorry, by increasing teacher awareness of how bias, privilege, and power can impact the students' engagement and sense of belonging. Okay. So here's what they did. So achievement. What was their specific goal? They wanted to engage students to meet learning needs in terms of math. Things weren't going well in math. They wanted to figure out how they could improve their math. How could they engage students to make sure that they were, how they could use, making sure that students could feel inclusive and how the curriculum was culturally responsive. That was the goal. So what have they done in the past? This is all the things that they've done. They had professional development for the teachers to ensure that they had effective problem solving and deep thinking abilities. They developed collaborative inquiries across learning centers. This was a way for teachers to build capacity to understand and learn from from their peers about effective math practices. What are other people doing? Can we bring those things into our school? They also purchased resources to support balanced, to learn about numeracy and hands-on learning. So they did these things. They looked at their data. So after they'd done all those things, they did all those things, then they said, what does the data tell us? Some students were still lacking the ability to be automatic, to retain basic math facts. It wasn't coming quickly, multiplication, division. Not all students saw themselves reflected in the questions and the learning materials in math. And that 38% of the students felt anxious about making mistakes in math. So what did they do? What were they going to do in order to make changes? They said, next year, we're going to support the development of basic understandings of math. So we're going to go back to basics. We are going to ensure that we focus on the fundamentals. They decided that they were going to ensure that there was a balanced numeracy program. They wanted to focus less, change the thinking around, it's about the process of the math questions. It's how you answer, how do you get to the answer versus the final answer, the right answer. They wanted to make sure the students understood the thinking around how to get to the right answer. And they also wanted to look at his environment as a third teacher. So I think I had mentioned that kids didn't see themselves in the math questions. So when they did test, they started to change. So rather than saying John and Jack, they used names that were much more culturally appropriate and relevant to the students that they were teaching. On the inside the classroom, and when we look at environment as a third teacher, they started using examples and pictures that reflected the students that they were teaching. And that's important. And that will look different from school to school. The next, they said equity. That was the goal. I mentioned that in the beginning. They wanted to ensure that they supported underserved communities by addressing the intersectionality of students and their identities. So no student is one thing. So we've got socioeconomic, we've got abilities, we've got gender. Students are just not one thing. So I think that's really important to consider. Abilities are different, genders are different. We have to consider that. So what have they done in the past? They really worked hard to integrate homeschool students into the mainstream program. They did professional development to support teachers to teach according to abilities and needs. So the thing is, meet students where they are, not where you want them to be. That's an important thing. They looked at inclusive design to plan initiatives in curricular and co-curricular activities. So that's things like engaging parents, families, elders, and communities, building staff and leadership capacity, analyzing data, and responding to student voice. These are important things. They also started a breakfast program because, as we know, people come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Not everybody can afford breakfast, not every kid is having breakfast, and we know that breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day. It's important for schools, for students to learn well that they are not hungry. So what did their data tell them? So they did all those things. What did the data come back and said? One of the things that it looked at was, it came forward that Black students looked like they were underachieving relative to their peers in literacy and learning skills, 22% below and 25% below the rest of the population. They also found that students that came from a low socioeconomic background, their literacy was 30% below others. Their learning skills were more than 30% below their peers. Now, we can look at that data and one could say, oh, you have to look at your biases here. We know that not all, you cannot singularly say that Black students are underachievers. You can't say that. You also can't say that students that are from low socioeconomic backgrounds are underachievers. We have to dig deeper to understand why that would be happening. And this is really, really important. So they did. What did they do to respond to that information? They made sure that there were equitable access to resources. Perhaps kids weren't doing well. Maybe they didn't have internet at home. Maybe they didn't have computers. Maybe they had one computer and 4 siblings each had to use that. Therefore, students didn't have the opportunity to have access to computers. So we make resources available at the school, so the student has access to computers. The Makerspace program, if that's possible, the library. So I know now in this time of the pandemic, it's a little bit difficult for teachers and schools to do that. But we need to think about what are the other ways we can do that. And I know many schools are now giving students laptops or Chromebooks at home. And I know that the board has now made it a priority to give all grade 9 students a laptop. And I believe when they start in grade 4 or 5, get a laptop. They made sure that there were before and after school programs 5 days a week so that kids had a place they could go to either before or after school, and that they had an ability there to get homework help, but there was a place for them to go to meet with peers and talk about schoolwork. They made sure that the curriculum was culturally responsive. So again, I go back to when you look in the classroom, when the students look around their classroom, do they see themselves in the classroom? Do they see pictures of themselves? The things that they're learning, is it reflective of whether that's Black History Month, whether that's any kind of other heritage month, Pride Month? Are we ensuring that our curriculum speaks to those things so that all all children feel like they are part of the school. And then they also looked at addressing the intersectionality of identity. So I think I mentioned the think piece around inclusive design, inquiry-based learning, so letting the students lead, letting the students identify what they want to learn about, and then making student choice. The third thing is around well-being. What was the specific goal? They wanted to make sure that there were strategies, support, experiences, and activities for students so that they could feel comfortable recognizing their own emotions, and that they would have the tools and confidence and trust to seek help. And again, I say more so than ever, this is really important. And I would really encourage you to speak to your principals around what is our school doing to address this as we bring our kids back into the classroom after an 18-month in a lockdown. So what have they been doing so far? They had done a student well-being survey. So they asked the students, how are you feeling? They established a chill zone in their school. And this was a space that kids could go to engage and to talk on a daily basis. They made sure that they had opportunities for student engagement within the 4 A's. And the 4 A's are arts, academics, athletics, and attitude. We know that not every child is interested in the arts, not every child is interested in academics, and not every child is interested in athletics. You need to be able, the schools need to offer programs that address the different needs of students. And it's important that the principal supports this. The principals finds teachers to engage and help in these particular areas so that all students feel like they have a place that they can go to meet children who are like-minded and who have similar interests. And this is a way to feel included. This is a way to feel a sense of belonging. They also created a wellness corner on their website. So kids could go there to get tips and tools. Parents could see what was happening in the school and then could support that at home. They also made sure that each student had a caring adult. Each student had someone that they could go to if they wanted to talk to them. So they did all those things. And those are amazing things. I think those are fantastic. They did all those things. So what did the census data tell them after they did that? So in terms of discussing, I think I mentioned that each child was given a caring adult to speak with. So 31% of the students felt comfortable discussing a personal issue with the teacher. In 2018, that increased to 43%. But what's interesting is 43%, that's we've got a 12% increase. But what it says at 43% is that 57% of our students didn't feel comfortable discussing a personal issue with the teacher. That means that out of 1 in every 2 students, kids didn't have anyone that they could go to, even though a caring adult had been assigned to a student. And even more so, even though 66% said, yes, I have an adult to speak to in the school, only 43% of them were talking to them about something personal. So they weren't going beyond a hi, how are you? It wasn't getting any deeper than that. The other thing is 56% of the students said it was easy to make friends at school. Again, a noble number, 56%. But what it also doesn't say here is that when you look at them the other way, 44% of our students did not think it was easy to make friends at school. Potentially 44% of our students had no friends or were having difficulty. And we know that the social engagement at schools is really important for a thriving student. So what did they do? They created zones of they used a program called Zones of Regulation. And this is a program that allows students to understand how to deal with different types of emotions and how to express themselves. So they gave the students the tools in order to learn how to do that. They also looked at teaching the teachers, they gave them trauma-informed professional development. So rather than waiting until a student comes to you about an issue that's affecting them, teachers were taught to look for signs. So if a student's not focusing, that doesn't mean a student's not interested. Maybe they didn't have breakfast that morning. Maybe something's going on at home, rather than making assumptions that the student can't learn or the student is not interested. If someone is suddenly withdrawn, the same thing, and then asking the right questions to be able to provide support to those teachers. And then they also really, the importance of active listening training for all staff. And this is something for parents as well too. How can we become active listeners? And active listening is really about paying attention. It's not about withholding judgment. It's about reflecting about what you've heard. It's about clarifying what you heard, not making assumptions, summarizing and then sharing. So sometimes if our kids come to us and say, I'm not feeling well because I had a fight with my friend and I'm really upset about it, it's about reiterating what you've heard. So we're not assuming what we've heard. And then talking about what the outcomes could be. And this is really important. We need to listen to our students in order to know what they need. And we have to do the same thing with our kids rather than assuming what we think. And this is where unconscious bias comes into play. This comes into where we start to have exclusionary behavior. So that's my example of what I think is a good school improvement plan. And I want to leave some time, 15 minutes for questions. I really wanted to hopefully have you leave here knowing that the participation of school counselors, families, and caregivers is a huge component of the school improvement plan. And if you're interested in getting involved, I really want you to consider the following things. Attend your school council meetings if you can. If you can't, and the school councils are at times and it's the same, and some encourage your principal and school council chairs to look at other ways or other times to have the meetings. Now that we have virtual school councils, it's easier for parents to engage, hopefully. Make sure that the minutes of your school council meetings are sent out on a monthly basis. So even if you can't participate, you have a sense of what's going on in the school. Attend school events when you can. Talk to your teachers about the learning goals for your child, and especially about how these goals are connected to school improvement process. I know for me, whenever I used to go to parent council, school interviews, parent-teacher interviews, I never knew what to ask. I kind of sat there, they'd ask me, what do you want to know? I think it's important for you to be able to reflect on what the school improvement process is, the school improvement plan is, and ask questions related to that. Ask them, what do you know about my child? How are they thriving in the areas of achievement, well-being, and equity? What are you doing? Look around the classroom. Do you see, is your child reflected in the classroom? How is the teacher going to do that? So we also too, as parents and caregivers and families, have to hold our school accountable to the school improvement plan. Participate in the surveys, school census, and other focus group activities. Without that data, it's impossible to make a successful and effective school improvement plan. So please participate. I know we're all busy families, caregivers, please find the time to fill out those important documents. Attend school improvement events. If you have an opportunity to give your opinion, use it. Meet with the school administration. Ask for meetings if you want to talk about these things. And definitely attend any school, I think I've already said that, sorry, it's there twice, attend school events that focus on implementing the school data. And when you attend your school council meetings, ask your council, whenever you're bringing up activities or budgets being spent, how is this helping to advance the goals of the school improvement plan? That school improvement plan is your foundation document. That's the plan that's going to make your school successful. That's the plan that's going to help achieve the well-being, achieve school achievement and equity for everyone. So I will kind of close by saying that, but I hope you found this helpful, and I'm definitely open to answering any questions. I know it was a lot, but we've got some minutes now. I'll go into the chat function. You can either put your questions in through the chat or you can ask them. So Shmuel asked a question, hope I'm not getting your name correct. What, according to you, will be impact the processes that was created in the result of the pandemic on future school improvement plans? Thanks. I think some of the things that are going to impact might be the way of which we gather. I think the school is in a really difficult time right now. And they too are learning as they go, as we as parents and families and caregivers are learning as we go. So I think it's going to be able to rethink how we gather the data, how we share that data, and how we hold the school responsible. And I think what will come out of some of this processes is new things that we hadn't considered, that we're finding that might be challenging in the classroom, because some kids are virtual, some kids are in person. I think those are going to be some of the challenges. One question. What do you think if improvement plans need to try to evolve also in questions as curriculum content topics of learning materials? What do you think need to try to evolve? I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you think? Shimel, I'm going to ask you just to clarify. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. What do you think school improvement plans need to try to evolve also in questions? Oh, I see what you're saying. I think it's a question when I talk about this is the culturally responsive curriculum where your students see themselves. So I'm going to say, rather than saying Jack bought 5 pies and Jill took 4, perhaps we use different names where Shamil bought 5 pies and Aretha brought 4. So that's what I'm trying to talk about in terms of the curriculum content. And when we talk about questions in schools and testing, I hope that answers your questions. I think it's also topics of learned materials is making sure that things that we're learning are also reflective of the school, of the students that are in our classrooms. I think that's important. I hope that answered the question. Any other questions? I'm happy to stay on the line or answer anything. Okay. I don't know if everybody's muted. So are you all muted? Because I can unmute. Or maybe no one has any questions. That's okay too. Oh. Okay, there's another question. I'm a parent at an alternative school. Typically the SIP is shared as a document pertaining both to our school and the school we share the building with. Obviously, we're a community that shares many needs, but there are differences. Is this how it is supposed to work? I would say no. I would say if the schools are different and unique, then each school should have its own school improvement plan. And I would ask, you should ask your principal to either, if they're going to make it one plan, distinguish what are we talking about between each schools. I would say that it should be different. And if it isn't, how can parent council support separating them? I think it's going back to that report that I had mentioned that the school board came out with in 2021, and bring that to your teacher. Each school should have their own unique school improvement plan. You cannot be effective if you're clustering something like that together. But that's where I would start. And then if that's not the case and you're not getting any traction with the principal, I would then speak to your superintendent. Okay. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer, even if you have a private question you want to ask me. What I would say is, I'm going to task each of you to go back to your school, to your principal, tell them about this presentation. And if you haven't seen your school improvement plan, ask them to share that with you. That will be the #1 thing I would say. And moving forward, they've already made it, because I can expect that things have been tricky this year because of the pandemic. Next year, how are we going to ensure that there's a plan to have parent and caregiver voices in the development of the school improvement plan? Ask your principal to put the school improvement plan, have that as an agenda item at every school council meeting, because you want to make sure that you're on top of the things that they said that they're going to do are happening. And I think you could frame it as, this allows us then to support you as a school council. Ensure that your principal not only presents what they have at the school council meeting, but sends that out to every parent in your school through the newsletter. So every parent knows what the improvement plan is for the school, because it also identifies and lets parents know what's going well and what's not going so well. So when I mentioned that piece around student well-being, if you see data that says that 44% of the students are having difficulty making friends, that's something that you could bring up at home. That's something that you could gently talk to your kids about. See how they're doing, and you doing your own, check-in as to how your kid is doing. Or the piece around they didn't have anyone comfortable to speak with. And other things like when I mentioned about, reflection, do they see themselves reflected in the classroom? Ask your children these kinds of questions. Do you see yourself in the classroom? So you can see if there's been any changes. And then when you go to the school parent interview, you can then ask the questions. Now, I know a lot of times the teachers will say, oh, you don't need to come and see me unless I ask. So a lot of times we just like, okay, everything's all right. I don't need to go in. But I would encourage each and every one of you, when you have an opportunity for a parent-teacher interview, you take your opportunity, because this is your way to find out what the teacher knows about your child. How well do you know my child versus how well are you assuming what you know about my child? It's really important to make sure that you develop that relationship with the teacher, that you know that your teacher is in a place where somebody knows and understands your child and is working with you to make sure that your child is successful, and making sure that success then lends itself to the school improvement plan. Okay. That's all I have. I really want to thank everyone for participating today. This presentation will be up, as I mentioned before, on the TDSB website. So please feel free to use it as you see fit. Take it to your school, share it with your school council, and then start the process of finding out how your school council, the parents, caregivers, and the community in your school can be involved in creating this plan, the roadmap. Thank you. And before I go, we've got 3 minutes. Is there any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everyone. And big thanks to Barbara and Queenie, our interpreters, for helping us today. I hope I wasn't talking too fast. Enjoy the rest of the conference.